Hey guys, welcome to our nutrition talk. This should be a comprehensive overview of everything you need to know about using food to assist the way you look and the way you perform. Now, this is not a talk about general optimal health. This is a very nuanced subject and it's going to be individual for each and every one of you, but it is basically talking about how to make you bigger, smaller, more or less muscular, right? And that's what we're going to get into. Now, this isn't every little tidbit of information ever. I'm hoping that this is just the main key things that you need to know to start affecting change right away. There's a couple of little bits of information I'd like to set up in terms of context before we get into the meat and potatoes here. That's a nutrition joke. Number one is that we have to understand that there is a plethora of nutrition information out there, and that information, while it might be, that a group of facts or correct information is this little circle, that everyone on the outside of that circle will have a different perspective and interpretation of those facts. And so while things can be true, they can also be interpreted through the lens of understanding that an individual person has. That is to say that a lot of people know absolutely nothing about nutrition other than their very narrow view of the topic. And so there are a lot of misinformation out there. Now, some of that is unintentional. It's simply a dense, complicated topic to understand. In addition to that, because humans have a disproportionate reliance and place disproportionate importance on food as a resource, we tend to have pretty deep emotional connections with how we eat, our habits around how we eat, and how that associates to our body image and how we feel about ourselves as well. Now, everyone has their own journey about how they feel about themselves and their associated emotions that comes with that. And I want to go through today with the understanding that there is a big market that simply takes these things that people find difficult in themselves and their relationship with food and tries to profit off that issue by selling a solution. So the talk we're going to give is very much no nonsense. This is not my information. I did not come up with this. This is just me relaying really solid scientific backed information to you guys that I've been using for the last 10 years. This is all from textbooks written by people that are way smarter than me, that have way better education than me in this specific topics, and this is the sort of stuff we use to get into shape, right? It also will hopefully show you where to draw your attention and what to ignore. And that's going to be very important because it's very easy to get wires crossed in terms of information from sources that may not be as valid and as truthful as hopefully what I'm going to bring you guys today. So with that being said, let's get into it. So there are only 3 nutritional factors that me and a lot of my team over the years have really focused on when it comes to changing their body. These are the 3 things that we actually consciously think about during a phase of intentional eating, whether that's to gain weight or to cut weight. And these are simple: the calories, the protein, and the volume. I'm going to spend the rest of this talk breaking all those things down. So calories, protein, volume. Let's move on to the next. When we think of these things, we can actually think of them a little bit like a pyramid, where the calories are the bottom level here. And once we have that foundational layer, then we can move up the chain to protein. And then once that's nailed, we can move up the chain to volume, right? We don't want to skip ahead in steps. And this is where a lot of nutrition information gets lost, is that we end up in this place where we're looking at all of this micro how much of this, how much of that versus how much of this. We get to the complexities straight away and we end up missing the most important stuff that there actually is to consider before we've even gotten started. And so this is our hierarchy of importance. We have calories first. Once you understand those, once you've nailed those, then we move up the pyramid. But skipping ahead just leaves us with poor foundations, and we won't build anything worth building if we jump ahead. You can see on the backside of this pyramid here, we have adherence. Adherence is just doing the actual thing. And adherence is really just putting into practice what you understand. I got a little analogy here. So if diet was a race car, adherence is the driver. Now what that means is you can have a great diet, perfect calories, protein, fiber, nutrient timing, supplementation, whatever you need for a diet, the best diet. And that could be the best race car. But if you're a terrible driver, if your adherence to stick to that game plan is truly terrible, then it doesn't matter how good the car is. You're just going to crash it. You just suck at driving. Vice versa. If you have maybe a diet, a car that is pretty mid, right? So not great handling, wheels are, they're old, but you have an excellent driver, you're still going to get some level of performance out of that vehicle. And the idea is that as long as you can stick to a game plan, you're probably going to see results. That doesn't mean it was the best game plan, and we can probably make it a little bit better. Service your cars, right? But if you stick with the game plan and follow things through, you're going to get results at the end of the day. To explain calories, protein, and volume. Calories are simply energy. They're actually a unit of energy, and so they measure heat loss. You can pretty much just substitute kilojoules, calories, and energy as meaning pretty much the same thing. Protein, for all intents and purposes, is muscle, right? It repairs muscle, it builds muscle, and when it gets broken down, it breaks down into aminos, and our proteins basically go off into the ether. Volume equals fullness or satisfaction. That is the way we're going to use this term, right? So the volume is simply how satisfied you are from a meal. Let's break all these three things down in a little bit more detail. Calories, right? How do they work? So day to day, you're going to have a certain amount of energy that you need to maintain your given weight. So let's say it's the space between my fingers here, right? That's how much energy you need. Now, each day, it's going to be a little bit higher and a little bit lower, right? Because you're going to use different amounts of energy day to day. But it averages out over the week to be, somewhere around that amount. Anytime that we go north of that, right, and we eat more food or intake more calories, and the way that we get calories in is via food and drinks that also have calories in there. It's the only way. Anytime we go above that line of maintenance, we have a surplus. We have a surplus of energy. And the body goes, that's awesome, right? Let's store it and save it for later, right? And it stores it as muscle or fat. If you're weight training, then it'll be a bit of muscle and a bit of fat. If you're eating a really big surplus, it'll be a lot of fat and a bit of muscle. If you're eating in a very small surplus, it will be a good amount of muscle, a little bit of fat. But anytime we go over this maintenance line, we're going to get some weight gain. That is how our body works. Vice versa, anytime that we get less energy in than we need to use throughout a day, then what we get is weight loss, right? Our body goes, we do not have enough energy. And so it takes the energy we have stored around our body, it takes muscle and fat, and it breaks that down and uses that as an energy source instead. That is very simple in terms of how to make someone gain or lose weight. We have known how to make people bigger and smaller for a very long time. The difficult part is the human component. It's your tendencies, behaviors, emotions around food. It's how you organize these things in your day-to-day life that makes this complex. But a deficit and a surplus is very straightforward. More energy, less energy. That's about it. More food, less food. Now, let's get into more details. So, up here in red, I have energy expenditure. That's just how much energy you use each day, to maintain your current size. This is maintenance, and this is a surplus. Now, I've actually mislabeled this, so I'm going to have to draw a little bit here, but on maintenance, it's basically when the calories and energy are matching each other. It means however much energy on average you're using, that's how much you eat. What's funny is that a lot of people tend to stick pretty close to maintenance calories if you don't tell them what they're eating. Most people stay the same weight most of the year, and then through a couple of periods throughout that year, maybe holiday period, maybe through a period of stress, they chuck on 1 or 2 kilos. Now, that happens over 10 years, you're 20, 30 kilos overweight, and it's not a slower metabolism, it's simply like, hey, this stuff kind of happens very slowly and you don't really notice it because it doesn't happen all of a sudden. On the right here, I have a surplus. Now, a surplus is where the calories simply exceed how much energy you're using each day, right? So your body goes, we have extra, stores it, muscle, fat. Now, this next one is a little bit more nuanced. So a deficit of calories is when we're going to lose weight, right? We don't have enough energy. The body breaks down the energy we have stored around the body and uses that as a substitute. There are 2 main ways we create a deficit. The first one is by simply lessening the food intake that we have and making this difference between the energy that we need and the food that we're inputting, and creates a difference there. Basically, the food is not enough, and so we take the muscle, we take the fat. So we can decrease the calories, right? The other way we can create a deficit is simply by really, really increasing the energy expenditure per day. So you could just use and move more energy day to day. This can also create a calorie deficit. I'm going to give you two like real world examples to make this a little bit more obvious. Person A, they're an office worker. They really don't have the time of day to be moving around a lot more than they already are. And so what they do is they try to lower their calories to create a calorie deficit, and it works, right? They maybe take a quarter of the food that they were eating before, and all of a sudden they have less calories coming in, and so they start getting weight loss. Alternatively, you have the same office worker, but through some sort of like schedule miracle, he's able to add another 2 hours of general exercise each day. Maybe it's an hour walk in the morning and then an hour of weight training in the evening. Now, he doesn't change his food at all. It stays exactly the same as it was previously, but he's burning so much additional energy that his body now demands more energy from him, and it's not getting it through the food. And so what happens as a consequence is it starts to break down the tissue that's got stored around the body for energy, right? So we can do one or two things to create an energy deficit. We can decrease the food, or we can increase the activity level. And both of those are super successful. Oftentimes we may use a combination of both, but both of them work really, really well. Now, let's talk about surplus deficits. What's involved? What are they? Right. So a surplus is obviously you have ample energy. You have more than your body needs. So what are we going to get? Increased mood, increased energy, better training, better recovery, faster injury fixes, which is pretty cool. Better hormone regulation. Your body has everything it needs through its food, so it can use those resources appropriately in the most efficient ways possible. You get faster muscle gain, but no, like it's not even close. You get way, way, way faster muscle gain if you're in a calorie surplus. That is the main, you need nutrients to build more of yourself, right? And so having that abundantly will allow us to build more muscle. We get there you go, abundance of nutrients, right? So I bring that up because like sometimes, folks can have low iron. If you have an abundance of nutrients, more nutrients than your body even needs, we can reroute some of those nutrients to top up other areas. Your body's pretty good at using nutrients for transferring this nutrient into this other nutrient over here. We get more stress tolerance, more pain tolerance. We're going to get some fat gain anytime we're in a surplus as we get muscle gain, and we get an increase in performance. So surplus is looking pretty good. When it comes to a deficit or with cutting weight, we're going to get fat and muscle loss. Now, if you are new to training, you might not get that much muscle loss, which is pretty cool. And if you're returning to training, you may not get so much muscle loss. You may actually gain some muscle, and that is very normal to see that. But if you're established in the gym, you're probably going to get some muscle loss and some fat loss if you're doing a significant deficit. And the more dramatic the deficit becomes, the more muscle loss you're going to get. We get lower IQ and a decrease in memory. We get decreased reaction times. We get decreased recovery. It can affect your mood or your energy levels, but this tends to be something that creeps up the longer a diet goes, not necessarily heavily in the short term, although, you might be a bit hungry, and so that might affect your mood. We get a decrease in performance, but we can get improved long-term health. And this is a big thing. If we're 30 kilos overweight, we do have some pretty good literature saying that your health risks in a lot of categories do go up. If we can drop some of that fat from our bodies, we do have improved long-term health, even though we're taking maybe a little bit of a hit in terms of our ability to operate in the short term. Another negative of deficits is it is tough to get nutrients in. If you're low on iron and you decrease the total amount of food, you're probably not going to have additional resources, additional nutrients to then top up your iron, right? Now, you might look at this and go, wow, deficits are really brutal, but they have their place and they are okay in the short term. A lot of this consequence really accumulates the longer you run these deficits. And so by being strategic and mapping it out correctly, we can minimize the downsides, maximize the upsides. There is a distinct difference between weight loss and gain and body composition dieting. Even though they overlap, the way we apply them is actually significantly different. Weight loss and weight gain is about scale weight. It doesn't specify if we're gaining or losing muscle or fat. And a body composition diet is how much of your weight is fat versus muscle. And usually body composition training and body composition dieting is paired with weight training, right? To stimulate muscle growth, right? We're going to go into more specifics about both of them. At ISF, we tend to drive most of our clients in towards body composition, but there is a place for weight loss and weight gain, especially if it's going to improve your long-term health. Body composition is going to be something that is the main driver of how you look, right? How much detail you have, how much muscularity you have. And weight loss and weight gain will simply make you bigger or smaller. Both of them have their place. We're going to talk about why you would do either one now. What should you do? Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know you, viewer. I do not know you, and so I don't know which one you should do. Probably best for you to speak with your coach, if you have one, or find someone who is knowledgeable at these things and discuss with them, because you might want a great body composition and good muscularity. And if someone tells you to do a diet that's based around weight loss, you may actually be sacrificing a lot of muscle in that process. Vice versa, if you're doing a body composition surplus phase and trying to gain a lot of muscle, but you're already unhappy with your fat levels, that could be a recipe for not being very satisfied with the results that you get. Now, why would you diet for body composition? Well, these two women here and these two men are actually the same weight. And so trying to do a weight loss or weight gain diet and trying to move the scale, well, both of these people are 76 kilos here, right? So how important is the scale really when we could have two people in vastly different condition weigh exactly the same? And same for these women. We have Olympian versus, that's actually the average Australian. And I can't remember the weight off the top of my head, but these two women weigh the same as well. We can have vastly different performance, vastly different image, and vastly different health while weighing the same on the scale. So maybe chasing scale outcomes isn't nearly as important as chasing body composition outcomes. One thing that I do like to kind of discuss with folks is that working on your body composition is kind of like investing in the long term, compounding the interest, and doing weight loss goals, doing like weight loss dieting is kind of like paying the bills. And what I mean by that is your maintenance calories may be, let's make a number up, 2,000 calories a day. And maybe you're a 60 kilo person. If you become a 70 kilo person by adding 10 kilos of muscle, which should give you, some muscle mass here, some shape there, some details there, it should make you stronger, should make you perform better. And it has some implications on longevity and the health over the course of your life as well. Then what happens is, being a 70 kilo person, you burn more calories organically without doing anything. You just burn a 70 kilos person's worth of calories rather than a 60 kilo person's. To give an illustration of what that means, it means you can eat another 182 cheeseburgers a year and not put on any fat. That's pretty cool. So basically, being heavier allows you to eat more food and not put on any fat. That can be really useful. Here's why. This is my case. This is my argument for doing this approach. I think right now in Western society, we have the most beautiful food of all time. It's so readily accessible. And food is not just fuel. It is social. It is how we build bonds with each other over sharing meals. It is art. It is enjoyable. It's an activity all to itself. And to have the ability to indulge in the gifts that we've been given and the privilege that we have to eat yum food, being able to eat more of it in your lifetime is pretty cool. Now, I'm not saying you should just go on and chuck 10 kilos on so you can eat a little bit more at maintenance. What I'm saying is it's inevitable that you will eat probably a little bit more at times of your life. And if you have more weight on you, but are happy in the skin that you're in, then you're going to be able to eat more of it and not accumulate excess fat when you don't want to, because you've got more wiggle room in the amount of calories that you're actually burning day to day. When we gain those 10 kilos, it's with the assumption that you are building muscle and you're building a physique and you do like the way you look. And that's very important. Why would we do a weight loss diet instead of a body composition diet then? Come on, Dylan, you just said that body composition diets are like the best thing ever. So why would we even entertain the idea of doing a weight loss diet? Now, again, that is somewhat of a personal question. You'll have your own reasons. But I think if you are in a situation where you're newer to training, or perhaps you've got excess fat to lose, you might want to go on a weight loss diet instead of focusing on a body composition diet. There is a distinct difference in how we approach those two. Here we are. Here's the information. I'm glad someone prepared these slides ahead of time. A surplus for body composition would look like about 150 to 300 calories above maintenance. So let's say your maintenance again is about 2,000. We would eat 150 to 300 calories over that. Slow is the go when it comes to surplusing for body composition. Why? Well, we actually have good data on this, and anytime we seem to go over, a few hundred grams of scale weight gain a week, we tend to get a disproportionate amount of fat gain. The problem with that is not the actual fat accumulating, it's that at some point you're probably going to want to cut that fat off, and when you're cutting that fat off, that's a portion of time where you're not really gaining muscle too much, because we're having to actually go the other way and get into a deficit and lose weight, and therefore we're risking losing muscle. And so because muscle gains slowly, or the signal for muscle gain is slow over time, just being like in a little bit of a surplus week to week and running that for like 40 weeks instead of running a surplus for like 10 weeks but more weight gain is probably better for us, right? So slow is the go when it comes to weight gain. We just gain much more muscle that way. Deficits for body composition, 200 to 500 calories below maintenance. Why? Why don't we go faster? Well, we can go faster, but in the literature, it seems that anytime people lose more than about 300 to 400 grams off the scale a week, we do get about 50% of that in muscle loss. And that is a trade-off that is most likely not worth it for a lot of experienced gym goers, but maybe worth it for certain populations and certain people at certain times. Again, it's all contextual. These rules might be the rules that you operate under for whatever reason. Weight loss. Weight loss, we usually aim for somewhere between 0.5 and 1% of your total body weight a week. That could look very different in terms of calories depending on your size. Again, speak to your coach about it. Sorry, how do we find our maintenance calories? I've just talked about maintenance calories. Go a little bit above, go a little bit below. What does it mean? How do you find them? Stop interrupting me, viewer. This is one of those things that we do want to talk to someone about before we initiate this sort of process, because it is difficult and subtle to work out your maintenance calories, and it's not always a straightforward affair. We're going to start talking about protein now. So we've covered calories. Now we're going to cover protein and also fats and carbs. So the optimal level of protein, if you want to build as much muscle or maintain as much muscle as possible, in the data, it's somewhere between 1.5 and 2 grams per kilo. The most common number you'll see is 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein a day per kilogram that you are. So if I'm a 100 kilo person, I'm going to try to aim for somewhere between 160 and 200 grams of protein a day. Now, there has been recent studies showing that you can usually go as low as 1.3 and you're still not really going to suffer any consequences from that. So you could base your protein intake around this number per kilo instead. If you are not relatively lean, then you can probably simply do your body weight in protein grams, and that's still going to be pretty close to optimal, right? And all protein does is maintain and build muscle. That's a really simple interpretation of what it does for us. Not getting into the molecular level. What does it do, inside of our body? Don't worry about that. It maintains and builds muscle. These are proteins, right? So we have everything from meats, which people you would normally associate with proteins. We have a protein supplement. We have these little YoPro things that are very popular now. We have all the different yogurts and drinks that you can have. There's protein in a lot of dairy, high protein in eggs. We have, these days we have these pizza bases and breads and all these things where the protein content is kind of maximized. And then we have beans and cottage cheese and other variations of proteins that are also dense in that nutrient. And so these are the kind of common foods that you may see are quite protein dense. Carbohydrates. This is usually the big myth around this guy. Carbohydrates have a few grams of water for every gram of actual carbohydrate. The problem with that is that if you intake a bunch of carbohydrates and jump on the scale, you are going to be heavier immediately because you've just put in a lot of water. And so if someone has a bowl of pasta, jumps on the scale and go, oh my goodness, that bowl of pasta just made me accumulate a bunch of weight, it's just because you're more hydrated. And this can be very confusing. What do carbohydrates do? They provide energy. In fact, they provide the energy sources in multiple versions of energy sources that the body actually loves to use first and foremost. It's used for hard training and it's used for daily activity. And so if you want readily accessible energy, carbohydrates are the go. They also provide fiber being a carbohydrate, a more complex version. And fiber is associated with a decrease in all-cause mortality. It is so well studied that fiber is good for you that any diet that justifies taking it out is taking a pretty hefty L, because that means a pretty hefty loss, by the way, because it provides really, really great health benefits. So these are common carbohydrates that you will see. You will see bread and rice, and that's the two and sugar. That's when I ask people what they think carbohydrates are, I get that answer all the time. But carbohydrates are apples, oats, grains, potatoes, vegetables, fruits, and lollies, right? A lot of people have the misinterpretation that carbohydrates are some way disproportionately bad for health. But when we look at this image, I don't think we can justify that. I've never met anyone who's been unhealthy eating a ton of fruits and vegetables. Right, so moving on. Fats. What about them? They're essential in minimum amounts for hormonal regulation. If you take your fats too low, your eyebrows will fall out, your libido will stop working, you will feel pretty low energy pretty quickly, right? Having a minimum amount of fats at the very least is super essential for just being a healthy person. So, we never recommend anyone, except for maybe certain circumstances, anyone going below 1 gram per kilo as the minimum. The interesting thing about fats is that they're 9 calories per gram, and protein and carbs are 4 calories per gram. And so a lot of the foods people typically associate with being like higher calorie are actually usually pretty stacked with fats. I'll give you a quick example. A double quarter pounder from McDonald's is a food that I'm sure that almost everyone universally says is probably not the best for you. If you look at the calories in that, it's about 900 calories. 450 calories from that burger come from fats alone. If you took the fats out of that burger, it'd be a 450 calorie burger, and it would actually have decent protein, making it healthy. Obviously, maybe the processing of the food or the preservatives or whatever you want to say about ultra processed food, maybe it's a little bit less healthy than eating a steak, for sure. My point is that it's often fats that accumulate a tremendous amount of calories in our food, and not the other two are macronutrients, being the protein and the carbohydrates. Now, these are your common fats. So we have animal fats found in meats. We have oils, whether it's coconut oil, whether it's olive oil. The yolks found in eggs. We have nuts, cheeses, creams. You can see a lot of dairy. Different seeds. Obviously, anything that's deep fried is deep fried in oil. And then like avocados and a couple of other types of vegetables that have some fats in them. Right, so what did I really tell you about macronutrients? Well, I said you should probably get your protein to a decent level and make sure you have a minimum amount of fats. Carbohydrates are good and healthy for you. And that's it. That's all you need to know. Basically, if you are nailing your calories and you want to move up the pyramid into protein, you would simply try to get an adequate amount of protein in each day. Plus, you may look at getting in a minimum amount of fats each day. We're going to go into some interesting stuff now. So, why are all diets the same? This is something that may be a little bit enlightening, because I'm sure everyone that is listening to this knows someone who's done a diet. Maybe you have done a diet, maybe to gain weight, maybe to lose weight. And we have seen a range of successes and well, not successes. I do want to touch on something here, which is when we undergo any sort of endeavor related to our body, it can be personal and there can be certain emotions that come up. It is important to take a step back and realize that people do interpret not being able to complete or adhere to a diet as failing. And this can be interpreted as a personal failing, as if you or the person that's dieting is somehow not worthy of the success to look a certain way, to feel a certain way, or to control themselves in a certain way. They can interpret this in many different ways, like a personal failing of your values, of your qualities. And this is not how I like to frame dieting at all. The way I like to frame dieting is we have a game plan. That game plan is going to be a bunch of inputs. What we eat, when we eat it, what we like eating. If a game plan doesn't work, then we just got to make a better one. And we iterate and make a better version and a better version until we find something that works. A diet working or not working is not a personal failing or a personal inadequacy in terms of quality. It's simply just something didn't work for you. And that's as far as we need to think about it. Try a better strategy. Come back next time and give it another crack when you're ready. These are why all diets are the same. Keto is very popular, something that you may have heard thrown around quite often. And keto is supposed to be just eliminating all carbohydrates. I've seen a lot of people talk about a keto diet and it's actually just low carbs. Keto is supposed to eliminate all carbohydrates, but for argument's sake, let's just get into it. I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner circled here. An even amount of protein, fats, and carbohydrates. What does keto do? It eliminates the carbohydrates, and because it eliminates carbohydrates, we get less calories, right? A portion control diet, same thing. Even meals over this side. What does a portion control diet do? It just eliminates calories from each meal. So you basically have smaller amounts of each meal. Because you've eliminated some amount of calories, you get less calories. Fasting. How does fasting work? Okay, so fasting just basically don't eat for a portion of the day. So the common windows are like 8, 12, 16, and 20, I think, right? So you don't eat for 20 hours, you don't eat for 16 hours, you don't eat for 12 hours of the day, and then you eat the other 12 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours, what have you. What happens? Well, you skip breakfast, and because you've skipped food, as a result, you get less calories. These three diets that I've mentioned here, they all have their special ways of enacting effects on the body. But in terms of weight loss, they're all operating by the same mechanism. They're eliminating calories from somewhere in the diet. Now, they all have hormonal effects. Little bits here, little bits there. But that's not what makes them work. And we have studies to show that. It's not the special mechanisms that are happening in each of these. It's simply that there is a reduction of calories. Other examples here. Atkins, low carb surgery, steroids, cleansers, etc. All of these work by the same mechanism. They reduce or they add calories. That's it. I know I just said a few things that are seem dramatically different in categories. I just compared surgery to doing a keto diet. But at the end of the day, all of these are interventions aimed at reducing or increasing calorie intake. Most of this that I've got here is from the context of trying to lose weight or to lose fat. But from the other side of trying to gain weight, there are drugs that you can take to increase your appetite. What does increase in appetite does? It leads you to eat more. What does eating more do? Increase your calories. Everything that you've ever seen work has been a direct or indirect way to increase or decrease calories. If someone that you know has lost weight or gained weight, they have increased or decreased their calories. They may give you a complicated explanation of why that worked, but really it's just a way for you to make it work for yourself. Why do all diets not work? Well, for this reason. Let's take the keto example. We take out our carbohydrates over here, and then as a response, we start eating like 6 avocados a day and put butter in our coffee, and we actually have an increase in fats to the point where the calories actually increase, and then you get weight gain. And someone will come and say, well, keto just didn't work for me. It's like, well, every diet works for everybody. Go back to the race car analogy. Any diet will work for anybody as long as you follow it well. If you don't follow it well and you end up increasing calories, yes, you'll gain weight when you don't want to gain weight, and vice versa. Moving on. Food volume. This is the good stuff. So, what is food volume? We've done our calories, we've done our protein, and now we're on to the volume part. The volume part is, I feel, the part that's most overlooked in most people's strategy when it comes to structured eating, right? They tend to focus on one element, but skip this element here. And I don't think it's spoken about enough, so let's get stuck into it. We have 3 diets: the gold, the blue, the red. The first gold one is 2,300 calories. The blue one totals 1,750 calories. And the red one over here totals 1,850. Now, let's take you step by step through these meals. For 450 calories, we could have a latte, right? So a bit of fluid. We can have an acai bowl for 750 calories. maybe like this, not super big. And then we could have Guzman nacho fries for 1,100 calories, for 2,300 total. If we look at the blue menu, for 400 calories, we can have 3 eggs and 2 bits of toast. Now that's less calories than the latte, and it's probably going to be like far more filling to have those 3 eggs and 2 bits of toast. We can have a Guzman burrito bowl, so still eating out, for 650 calories, and that's going to be more filling than an acai bowl for 750. Again, we have a bigger portion, but less calories. And then for dinner, we can have a stir fry for 700 calories, which is way less than the Guzman nacho fries, and the stir fry is going to be a way bigger portion. If you look at that circle that I drew, it's way bigger than the Guzman nacho fries. So the blue menu there is almost 600 calories less, but it's more food. It's more food volume. And in fact, in some ways, it's going to be more nutrient dense. Let's move on to this last section. This is the super full version, right? So for 350 calories, which is less than the eggs and the latte, we can have half a kilo of fruit and yogurt. We have a recipe like that in the ISF recipes, so that is a true thing that you can eat. Half a kilo of fruit and yogurt for 350 calories. You can have chicken strips and sweet potato for 500 calories. There will be so much more of sweet potato and chicken strips that the size of the dish will outweigh the burrito bowl and the acai, and it's still less calories. And then for dinner, we can have 800 grams of minestrone, 400 grams of barbecue chicken, 2 paddle pops for 1,000 calories, which is, so that's like almost like a kilo and a half of food. And we can have all of that, or we can go for the Guzman nacho fries at 1,100 calories. The point of this is simple. It's to point out that all food and all calories may be numbers. I'll repeat that. Calories may be just a number, but the food we eat is not just a number. We can have 800 grams of minestrone, 400 grams of barbecue chicken, 2 paddle pops, this much food. Or we can have more calories for a lot less food. All food volume is the size of your plate and how much food's on it. What's really interesting is if you map out 3 people and you have one of them who eats over the amount of maintenance, under the amount of maintenance, and at maintenance, what you actually might find is that you are looking at diets that look a lot like these 3 categories. The person who seems to never be able to put on weight, when you actually break down and look at their foods, it kind of looks like this. They're just eating so much that they can't eat anymore. The person who's maintaining their weight kind of looks like this, a nice balance of different types of foods. And then the person who seems to gain weight as soon as they look at food actually kind of eats really calorie dense food, and they may not even notice. And that's a factor of education, which is solvable. We can fix that. I find this stuff really interesting, and over my career, I have seen this line up almost every single time I've ever looked at anyone's daily eating habits, which I've thought is really interesting. Okay, I want to get into some details now. So, how do we even know what's in our food? I thought that I might take this time to just quickly talk about this. Nutrition information is usually on the back of each label. You can get a lot of apps that actually scan stuff and tell you what's in them, and that's really useful. MyFitnessPal being predominant among them. Now, I just look at the back of packets personally. Not everything has stuff on the back of packets, in which case I do some Googling, but I'm going to use the back of packaging for most things. Now, let me quickly give you a brief tour of the nutrition labels. Up here, we have energy, in which we have quantity per serve and quantity per 100 grams. And we have, in Australia, we're going to have a lot of stuff that have kilojoules. Now, that's the first barrier. It's like, wait, haven't you been talking calories this whole time and now we're talking in kilojoules? So, here we go. If you want to work out calories from kilojoules, all you got to do is divide by 4.1, or I just usually divide by 4. So if I see 400 kilojoules per 100 grams, I'm just going to divide that by 4, which is 100, so it's 100 calories per 100 grams. The energy just means calories, like we discussed at the start. Kilojoules, calories, and energy are all the same. Protein is located directly underneath that, and it will have per serve and per 100 grams. Now, you will find the servings per packet at the top here. So that's this thing here. If we want to do quantity per serve, and there's 3 servings per packet, you can kind of work that out for yourself from there. And it's even got serving size. So if you look at quantity per serving and then look at serving size, you might glean some information from that. I most often end up using this quantity per 100 gram thing anyway. It's a bit easier to use. So you got your calories here, you got your protein here, and then you got your fats and carbohydrates here. Now you might notice that carbohydrates, there's a little dash and it says sugar. All right? Sugar is a carbohydrate. I didn't mention sugar at any given time because it is just carbs. All right? And so whatever your carb intake will be, the sugar will be as much or less. Now, I want to explain that tracking and understanding what's in your food, it's not something that you have to master automatically. It's a skill set. And like squatting, it takes time to develop the skills necessary to get a good squat. But once you've developed a good squat, you'll have a nice ass and you'll have some nice quads and you'll develop a nice physique. The same way, if we're able to learn the skill of understanding what's in our food, we will have control over how much of us is fat and how much of it's muscle. And it won't be, we won't ever be limited by a lack of education. It is a skill, so take your time. It's okay to have days where we're not able to track properly or we aren't able to understand what we're eating. And for some folks, we don't even track calories. We don't even use this nutrition information. There are many ways to succeed when it comes to diet. And I'm just giving you guys some information here in case you do choose to track. How do we measure stuff? Well, Kmart scales like $7. And so if you grab scales and you weigh out 100 grams of your ingredient, then you can see what the sort of calories is in that 100 grams just by looking at the back of the packaging. This is my advice. This is my personal advice for tracking. This is what's worked for me. Might not work for you, but take this for what you will. I like to use a notebook. This is how I started out. So use a notebook and build a menu, right? Building a menu basically means, if you've got breakfast, you've got lunch, you've got dinner, let's just say you eat like that, then eventually you track calories of different meals that you like. And in the kitchen, you might have a little notebook and it has all your breakfasts, all your lunches, all your dinners. Okay. We often do this exercise at ISF. So what I like is I'd write the ingredients, the calories, and the protein. In this example, I have a menu for deficiting and a menu for surplusing. And what we do is we write down the ingredients. So let's say we're doing eggs. So we do 2 eggs, 2 bits of sourdough, 10 grams of butter, 10 grams of barbecue sauce. I write the calories, 160, 220, 40, and 15, and then I got my total down the bottom, 435. Okay. Once you've calculated this meal once, you don't have to calculate it again. You can just go back, open up your notebook, and bang, it's already there. And so if you calculate the foods that you like, you don't have to recalculate them. I find that that is super efficient, and it's the lazier way to do things, which is good by me. Surplus, on the other hand. So let's say we're trying to gain weight. We do 4 eggs instead. We do 2 bits of sourdough, half an avo, 2 slices of cheese, 10 grams of butter, 10 grams of barbecue sauce. All we've done is add half an avo, mashed up onto the bread, and added 2 bits of cheese. And a couple of eggs, obviously. The calories end up being 845, right? So, almost double what we had in the deficit version. But the food quantity isn't that much different. So we're getting a lot more calories for a lot less size. If you're trying to gain weight, that could be really useful. If you're trying to cut weight, maybe that's something you want to stay away from. Now, I've also put the total grams of protein in this one, so I've wrote the protein on this margin as well. I just want to point out that once you've done the work to figure out what's in your food, you can actually just keep the information and come back to it whenever you want. And eventually, if you do this for long enough, like I have, you have like 100 recipes in mind for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner, and so I'm never really struggling to decide what to eat. Some more advice that I have for you guys is to steal ideas from us. So we have all of these recipes with the calories already done. You can take this and start to use it for ideas about what you yourself would like to eat. If you copy it or you don't, doesn't matter. It's here to prompt you to figure out what you like to eat, and then figure out the calories, and then figure out the food volume and see, is that filling? Do you enjoy that? Is that something you enjoy eating? Whether you're on a deficit or a surplus, we can still be very satisfied from our food. As you can see by these wonderful foods that we've put up here for you guys to take. These are factors that are related to diet, but I didn't really mention too much. Whether something's organic, whether you eat before, after, or during training, caffeine intake, higher or lower quality food sources, so good fats, bad fats, your metabolism, your salt intake, artificial sweeteners, are they good or bad? Meal timing, supplementation, sugar intake, high or low GI foods, processed or refined foods. And it's not because these factors aren't in some way relevant. It's just that they don't really affect your body composition too much. So they won't really affect how you look all that much. They may affect other qualities in your life, most definitely. But they're not going to heavily affect how you look. And that's a really important distinction. So we can mostly ignore these things if our goal right now is to get into shape. Okay, I'm going to read this one verbatim. Dieting, being in control of the variables that alter your weight and assist your body composition, isn't complicated. Calories, protein, food volume. But that doesn't mean it's always easy. Treat this as a game plan. We may falter or miss the mark sometimes, but each time we pick ourselves up, we learn from it, and we will be a bit better. Observing how we react to the plan, what works in the game plan, what doesn't, and building on it will allow us to develop the absolute best combination of nutritional factors that will uniquely suit you. Food is simple. Humans are the complicated system. Calories are simple. We're complicated. Do your best. Pick yourself up if something doesn't work, and ask for help if needed. Goodbye.